Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing what I believe are the worst movies and the most disappointing movies that I saw in 2018. I don't usually go out of my way to see every bad movie that comes out in theaters. I usually prefer to spend my time watching things that I actually enjoy. So in this video, I'm going to combine movies that I think are just awful with movies that I thought failed to live up to my expectations. Some of these were even among my most anticipated movies of last year, but not everything can live up to our hopes and dreams. So without further ado, let's get into the first one I'll be discussing. Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. Now, although I don't really talk about it very often, I'm actually a big fan of the Harry Potter franchise. I've read all of the novels and seen all of the movies many times. I've even been to Harry Potter World, which is worth checking out if you're ever in the area. With that being said, I enjoyed the first Fantastic Beasts movie. However, I don't think that it was quite at the level of some of the better Harry Potter movies. With that being said, this movie had a lot going for it, exploring Dumbledore and Grindelwald's backstory, and showing how some big events came to be. Unfortunately, this movie ended up being an unfocused mess. There's way too much going on, and the focus is almost never on what we really wanted to see in this film. Johnny Depp and Jude Law are really good in this movie. Also, the twist at the end is something that I didn't really care for, and something that I think could have been handled much better. Let's hope that they can salvage this in a sequel, and hopefully add another screenwriter to the mix. Solo: A Star Wars Story. Now, this movie just had to be on the list. Despite my and nearly everyone else's lack of interest, Solo is still a Star Wars movie and has a high standard of quality to live up to. Unfortunately, the movie didn't do that. Even going into this movie knowing that it wouldn't be good, I lowered my expectations, and yet the film still found a way to disappoint me. The plot is predictable, the acting is hit or miss, the cinematography is bad, and the politics are once again on display with L3, who is one of the most annoying characters since Jar Jar Binks. All of that added up to the most boring Star Wars movie since Attack of the Clones. Fans spoke with their wallets here, and this film bombed at the box office as a result. This definitely isn't the movie that Star Wars fans needed after the mess that was The Last Jedi, and it only served to make the hole even deeper that those in charge of Star Wars have to dig themselves out of. Let's hope that Episode 9 can fix some of the damage that these past two films have done to the franchise. Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. From the moment I first saw the trailer for Jurassic World 2, I knew there was a problem. The whole premise of the film, where they had to go back to save the dinosaurs from an island that's for all intents and purposes about to explode, was ridiculous. But what I didn't know back then was that that would be the only good part of the movie. Jurassic World 2 is what happens when you take the last third of Jurassic Park 2 and then stretch it out for most of a movie. Only this time in a spooky mansion with a dollar store John Hammond and a cloning subplot. The more that I thought about this movie since I first saw it, the more I've come to dislike it, and I really liked the first Jurassic World. The only part that I really cared about in this movie was the very ending, where it seems like they're going to finally do what almost every Jurassic Park movie before this seemed like they were going to do, and never did. But will they actually do it this time? And will I even care? Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But the answer is probably no. The Predator. Now, this movie was on my most anticipated of 2018 list. The original Predator is one of my favorite films of all time, combining action, horror, and sci-fi in a near-perfect way, and of course featuring Arnold Schwarzenegger in his Hollywood prime. However, the sequels have left something to be desired. So when I heard that Shane Black, who played Hawkins in the original, was directing this movie, I was definitely interested. I didn't like Iron Man 3, which I consider to be one of the worst MCU movies, but I thought maybe he understood this franchise, because of course he was involved with it from the very beginning. And boy, was I and every other person who thought this wrong. Because The Predator was bad. Every single character is comedic relief, the writing is terrible, the plot is even worse, and the original Predator, which is what most fans came to see here, was totally wasted to make room for some crappy CG Mega Predator. The same concept was already done better in Predators, and the last third of Predator 2 is better than this entire movie. So I wouldn't even bother watching this movie unless you can get it cheap at Redbox or on streaming. And even then, you could just watch the original. Pacific Rim Uprising. Now, I really enjoyed the original Pacific Rim. It's not my favorite Del Toro movie by any stretch, but it's a fun mech action movie that's a lot like an anime come to life. And you guys know that I like anime, or at least good ones. With that being said, this movie has way more problems than the original, and most of what is fun there is completely gone here. Most of the new cast is bland and uninteresting. A few members of the original cast return for this one, but are completely misused. And even the action isn't that good except for a couple sequences. And in between those sequences is a bunch of boring scenes that are a chore to get through. This movie is basically like Independence Day Resurgence, but with mechs instead, and a severe lack of Jeff Goldblum, which Jurassic World 2 also had. So just go watch the original Pacific Rim, or just skim through Uprising to get to the few good scenes. Skyscraper. And the worst movie that I saw all year would have to be without a doubt Skyscraper. This movie is just terrible. A horrible CG-filled mess that tries to be a modern-day Die Hard, but ends up being a bad disaster movie with a giant building. Most of the sequences that happened involving The Rock are so ridiculously unbelievable that they're not even fun. Like when he climbs up the side of a building, and then jumps to another one. And the fact that there's CG everywhere in this movie, and it looks like it's mostly shot on a blue screen doesn't help matters. I'd rather watch some of The Rock's rough earlier movies than this one ever again, because Skyscraper is perhaps the worst thing that he's ever been in. And the guy was in The Tooth Fairy. Not to mention being Rocky Maivia. So these were the worst and most disappointing movies for me of 2018. What do you think were the worst movies of 2018? Let me know down below. Also, if you're new to this channel, then don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications so that you can see all of my videos right away when they come out. And make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.